welcome Dr. Koenraad Elst to present his paper on egalitarianism in the life.
So Siddhartha Gautama, that's his personal name. He was, by all accounts, an elitist. He was an absolutely upper-class fellow. He was the son of, you could say the Raja, but the meaning in context turns out to be the president for life of the Shakya Republic. So it was a bit of an in-between system. You had more or less a monarchical ruler, but only for life. It was not automatically hereditary. He happened to be white-skinned and tall. That's at least how the Buddhist sources describe him. And it may explain why he was very popular among Nazi-leaning scholars at the time. Because, and here I am immediately already interrupting myself for a very useful snippet of knowledge. The view among the Ambedkarites, the neo-Buddhists, that the Brahmins were Aryan invaders, whereas Buddhism was a revival of the native religion, was inverted by many Western scholars. They said that, on the contrary, the Brahmins, with their puerile ritualism, here I quote Max Muller, were in fact taking over a lot of the religion they found among the natives, whereas the Buddha was a reviver of the original Aryan invader traditions. And that's why he's called Arya all the time, Arya Dharma, Arya Satyani, the Four Noble Truths, and so on. So they think he was a real Aryan against the rest of you. He had at any rate a princely upbringing in a palace, and since his age 20, he served as a senator in the assembly of the Shakya Republic. He would not automatically become the successor, but given all the trump cards he held, he would normally have done so. And throughout his life, he is being consulted by other kings and rulers for political advice. At birth, according to the story, he's predicted to become either a great ruler or a great sage. That, of course, he fulfilled. So this republican system of rule is probably an ancient Indo-European institution, of which you find the remains in many of the other Indo-European tribes. So you have an assembly consisting of the aristocracy, that is, it was only for warriors. In the Athenian parliament, it was also a rule that you had to have served as a soldier before you could get entry to the assembly. So it was a restricted rulership, like you had in the Holy Roman Empire, where a number of noblemen elected one among them to be the next king or emperor. The Buddha has this republican mindset, and he also applied it to his Sangha, although during his lifetime, of course, his own dominance was such that we don't hear of anyone else actually taking decisions. And also it was a very limited equality. There was, of course, first of all, the rule of seniority. That was very important. And elements of class distinction also remained, although in a monastic order, whether Buddhist or otherwise Hindu, in principle, these caste distinctions disappear upon ordination. In Hindu systems, you actually perform your own death rituals. So all your former distinctions, your name, your family, and so on, disappear. Now let's talk about the term Arya. So the Buddha called his system also Arya. And it is now in modern literature, and especially as Westerners understand it, and as Neo-Ambedkarites understand it, the purely moral or psychological meaning of noble. And indeed, in the Aryan invasion debate, I hear Hindus say all the time, oh, Arya does not mean race, it means noble. Well, I agree that it does not mean race, but I don't agree that it means noble. It has come to mean that, but originally it had a few other meanings. So we have the term noble in the Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path. It's very thoroughly Buddhist, but not only Buddhist. So in the Proto-Indo-European phase, as can be seen still in Iranian and in Hittite, and in the Vedic phase, as can be seen in the Rig Veda, Arya means a fellow tribesman. It means us as against them. And so the Vedas, the Rig Veda was written by sages belonging to the Paurava tribe, and within it mostly to the Bharata clan. And they use it for fellow Pauravas. Even enemies, Pauravas who land in the camp of the enemies are still called Arya. Whereas friends, meritorious friends, whom they are grateful to, are still not called Arya. Now, when the Vedic tradition came to spread to other tribes, when it became prestigious all across India, the term Arya came to mean Vedic. And it's in that sense that you have the South Indian Brahmin names Ayar and Iyengar that come from this Arya. And it would indeed retain this link with Vedic tradition. Like, for instance, in the Manusmriti, it is described which parts of the world are beneficial. And so the best of them all is precisely the Vedic territory. And so that's where names like Aryavarta come from. The Arya Samaj also has the explicit meaning of the Vedicist society. So the word Arya in the case of the Buddha, to some extent, may be interpreted as meaning Vedic. He saw his teaching as the original Vedic teaching. He was fostering the Vedic spirit, the spirit in which he assumed that the Vedas had been composed. As against the decadent, that's how he conceived it, formalism around it. You see, the attitude of back to the roots is of all ages. We see it nowadays all the time. We see it throughout history. If you see the history of Christianity, they're always talking about a second evangelization is needed. We have to revive the spirit of the first Christians and so on. Well, here you see he's reviving the spirit of the rishis. And indeed, you see, many times the Buddha himself, who nowadays is wrongly depicted as a revolutionary, actually appealed to the ancient way, saying that he himself trod the ancient way in the footsteps of the Buddhas of the past. However, the term Vedic does not only have an ideological or philosophical meaning, but also a sociological meaning, because the Vedic initiation was given to the upper castes. And so it came to mean elite. It came to mean upper class. Now, here you see everybody assumes that since nowadays Arya is assumed to mean noble, that it means the same thing in the discourse of the Buddha. Because, we have the Sanskrit text. Most people nowadays use translations, but they are as faithful to the original as the translator has cared to be. And in fact, you see, most modern translators have depicted the Buddha as favorably as possible in modern terms. And so since today we have a value of egalitarianism, they prefer not to highlight the element of social distinction, of pulling rank, in the case of the Buddha. And so in works on the Buddhist attitude towards the caste system, very often they highlight later Buddhist philosophers like Dharmakirti, who lived more than 1,000 years after the Buddha, and who indeed has polemicized considerably against caste. But the caste system by that time was much harder. It was the, classical caste system as Hinduism is depicted, which did not exist in the Vedic age and which was in a stage of transition of being formed at the time of the Buddha. Moreover, this criticism was not at all something in terms of modern egalitarianism. You see, all these Buddhist philosophers are concerned with liberation and not with society. And so whenever it is posited that Brahmins are more endowed for liberation than others, that is something to argue against. But otherwise, that they are unequal in society, well, that's just not a concern of the Buddhists. And in practice, both the Buddha himself and all the later Buddhists are non-abolitionists. I mean, I borrow a very prejudiced term from the struggle of against slavery, as if caste is the same thing as slavery. But at any rate, they didn't care to change society. And that's also logical and entirely in keeping with the Buddhist project of pursuing liberation. You see, if you want to change society, that is a very demanding task. Seeking some kind of happiness for your own individual life, that's already very serious. Very many people never succeed in that. Some more or less do, although their happiness, according to the Buddha, is not the real thing. But at any rate, trying to make society better, that's a far larger task. If you want to do that, you're going to spend your whole life on it, and you're never going to reach liberation. That's very, very simple. Now, about the Buddha's attitude towards caste, it is said that, the Buddha is quoted as saying, what the noble ones say is the truth, what the others say is not the truth. And why is this? The noble ones understand things as they are. The common folk do not understand. Furthermore, they are called noble truths because they are possessed by those who own the wealth and assets. So the noble ones understand things as they are. The common folk do not understand. Furthermore, they are called noble truths because they are possessed by those who own the wealth and assets of the noble ones. Furthermore, they are called noble truths because they are possessed by those who are conceived in the womb of a noble person. So here you see there is surprisingly something for Marxists who want to see everything, including religious views, in terms of ownership. And there's also something for traditionalists who insist on caste by birth. You see here, definitely he is thinking of lineage, of heritage, those who are conceived in the womb of a noble person. So this is a very far cry from the egalitarian Buddhism that nowadays people imagine. Ambedkar saw it like that because he had his knowledge of Buddhism mostly from Orientalist works. You see, he didn't know Pali himself, maybe some Sanskrit, but he thought he worked in English. And at that time already there was quite a wealth of Western Orientalist books about Buddhism available. And so in his case, you already see the problem that you still see among Orientalists and among all these Westerners interested in Oriental things, namely that first they read English language introductions, and only then, if they get to that stage at all, they may read some original works, but they read them through the lenses of what they have already learned through the introductory works. An example, I once very laboriously translated parts of the Ashoka Avadana about the life of Ashoka, where you see Ashoka actually killing Jain monks. And so in the introduction, the translator says, the editor says that, oh, how is this possible, to attribute such an ugly thing to Ashoka, whom we know to be a noble, lofty, peaceful man, and so on. But how do we know that? If the original says precisely the opposite. And so he tries to impose the picture that has been created nowadays, in this case about Ashoka, on the original, the primal sources about Ashoka. And so this is what is being done to Buddhism all the time. There is a modern manufactured view of the Buddha, and it is through these lenses that we see the original, and that we sort of tailor the original to fit our modern idealized image. Okay, so in the case of the Buddha, there was definitely not yet a shift from the meaning elite of Arya to the ethical meaning of magnanimous, virtuous, and so on. It may be, on the curve from the one to the other somewhere, but the sociological meaning was certainly still operative. And that's just like in English, noble originally means a member of the nobility class. It's only later, metaphorically, that it has come to mean virtuous and so on. He was not strictly speaking interested in social reform. However, he did meddle in social affairs once in a while because he was consulted all the time. You see, as a member of a princely family, he was one of the elite. So other people of the elite saw him as one of them. Ultimately, even a family relation, because all the Kshatriyas in North India considered themselves as members of the Solar dynasty. And then he knew many of them personally. It is they who financed his order. You see, the success of Buddhism, as opposed to the many other sects that must have existed at the time, is partly due to his elite position. You see, people financed him, like, for instance, the building of monasteries was largely the work of these patrons. You see, his monks were not even allowed to work. And so to get the ordinary people to come out and do physical labor building these monasteries, well, you needed a royal decree where they said, okay, you see, businessmen pay taxes, and laborers, they can pay taxes through labor. So 1 month every year, you come and do things for me, like building these monasteries of my friend, the Buddha. And so he was a monk. He was no longer in the business of politics. He had no longer any interests to defend. So that made him far more trustworthy. He was neutral, but he was also competent. He knew statecraft. And so it is on these occasions that he gives us a glimpse into his views of society. And these are hardly revolutionary, though they're interesting. And we see him make some serious mistakes on that occasion. The greatest failure of his life is the Shakya Hatya. or not being able to prevent the Shakya Hatya, the murder, the massacre, the genocide of his own Shakya republic. Namely, it happened because of a matter of caste. You see, this King Prasenajit of Kosala, a childhood friend of the Buddha, when he has made it in life, he feels entitled to a Shakya princess, because the Shakyas are a very prestigious tribe. And so the Shakyas don't really want to spoil or not spoil, waste one of their daughters on this this interloper. And so they give an illegitimate daughter of their president for life. They pass her off as a princess. So it's only later that Prasenajit, or in fact his son, the one who is born out of this wedlock, finds out the truth, that she's not a princess, that therefore he is not of Kshatriya birth, at least on the mother's side. So the father repudiates his wife and his son. The Buddha then intervenes, or is asked for his opinion. And this, if he was really an anti-caste militant, this would have been a perfect occasion. You see, the king has all the power. If the king says, stop doing caste, that would really make a difference. And yet, you see, that's nothing of the sort. He pleads for taking the wife and the son back, because according to him, they are real Kshatriyas. Why? Because Kshatriya or other caste titles are originally inherited only through the father's line. And so the caste of the mother is not important. This is in the case of Veda Vyasa very clear. He is the son of the sage Parashara and this fisher girl Satyavati. And so she is not the same caste as him, yet he is the sage par excellence. So you see, this son Virudaka can become a fine king of Kosala, a true Kshatriya, regardless of what his mother is. But you see, the Buddha is an old man by then, and things have changed. And Virudaka, doesn't like it. He knows that by then norm is that both parents have to be of the same caste. And so he wants to take revenge on the Shakyas, and ultimately he does so by massacring them. And the Buddha, at long last, is reduced. First he tries to prevent it, then he is reduced to just explaining that they have just merited it. All the people who are being killed, they deserve to be killed because of what they did wrong in their past life. Another failure, I have explained at length in my PowerPoint. I will ask the organizers to send the PowerPoint to everybody so you can check the story. This I'm not going to explain at length, but it's a famous story with just a few interesting points in here. Namely, the king of Magadha wants to annex the neighboring Virji Republic. But he laments that the Virji Republic seems to be invincible. And so his prime minister, Varshakara, asks the Buddha what the secret is of the strength of the republic. So, next slide. He visits the Buddha, and he lays his cards on the table. He says very explicitly what he wants. He wants the formula for attacking and conquering the Virji Republic. So it's not that the Buddha can say, oh, I didn't know. No. He knows that he's now a pawn in military strategy. And it is on that occasion that he explains that the secret of the strength of the Republic is that they follow the 7 precepts of non-decline. And these are, first of all, unity. You have to take your decisions together. And then several other rules, mutual harmony. You have to follow the laws. You have to respect elders. You have to respect women. And here you see, it's again a very telling little detail.
Previous slide, Peter. Okay. Srinivas.
End. The title is End. So you have to respect the elders, is the 4th. You have to respect women. And here, offhand, with, totally natural, unself-conscious, the Buddha says that women and girls of good family should be respected and protected and treasured and so on and so on. You see, that's like as if he doesn't care about women of lower class. And I mean, it's not that he means any slight against any others. It's just that it comes totally natural to him to think in an elitist fashion. And so, here and there in many of the Buddha's talks, this comes through. You see, now we have to like scan the whole Buddhist tradition for precisely these little details, these little hints. You see, because they very strongly establish the picture of the Buddha as an elitist. And it's not, it's no big deal. That's just who he was. Then you have to respect holy men. That's number 7. And you have to respect spiritual institutes. Now, that's an interesting point. You see, he says that the temples and so on that are there have to be maintained. The pilgrimages that exist have to be kept alive. And so much of this tradition is, of course, Vedic. If he wanted to be a revolutionary, well, he would have said the opposite. And so, no, you see, he's entirely in the tradition. And, his own teaching does not in any way constitute a break with that tradition. So he says, okay, the strength of this Virtue Republic is that they follow the 7 precepts. And then Varshakara says very explicitly, okay, so this way, now I know what it is. Then he doesn't say, now we're going to conquer them. So, in a way here, Buddhist apologists can say, oh yeah, he didn't connive at the conquest of the Virtue Republic. Nevertheless, Varshakara does then set out a strategy for undermining these 7 precepts and conquering the Republic. So just a bit of detail here. He acts as if he has a quarrel with the other rulers of Magadha. He is thrown out as a prime minister, and then he manages to become the Minister of Education in the Virtue Republic. And here the tradition doesn't say exactly how he does it, but through the students, he somehow contaminates the parents so that they no longer attend the assembly, no longer care for following the laws and so on. So the 7 precepts are in decline. And it is ultimately conquered by Magadha. This is just a detail in the Buddha's life, but it teaches us quite a few things about his social philosophy. Like he is totally in favor of the harmony model. You see, like Confucius in China, who was his contemporary. So you have to fortify society not by repression, not by more blue in the streets, as our politicians say, but on the contrary, by having celebrations together, by good music and so on. So you have to embed in it a heartful care for everything that is precious, women, sages, traditions, and so on. So this belies completely the Ambedkarite view of the Buddha as a revolutionary. And moreover, the inner workings of society that he doesn't even mention at all. You see, he does not say that the lower classes are oppressed, that they need class struggle and so on. He doesn't really say anything about them. He cares about human attitudes. And so that's what he counts on for bettering society. You see, this talk of social structures and so is not there at all. So you have to have collective decision making, okay. Nobody can be against that. But the question that we can critically ask here is, does it make society invincible? Yeah, this sounds to me a lot like Mahatma Gandhi, who said that, you know, a satyagraha militant cannot be defeated. Now, that's not true. So this soul force has not achieved very much, and goodness does not make invincible. I mean, that's a fact of life. And moreover, it is itself quite vulnerable. People who are good are not incorruptible in the end. So it's more beneficial than an iron hand, but it's certainly not invincible. Anyway, these 7 precepts were also applied to the Sangha. This is also completely described. And so this Sangha is a great success story. It still exists after 2,500 years. You know, all his interventions in public life outside his monasteries, when he's not talking about the method for liberation and so on, when he's talking about society, there is just no hint of egalitarian social reform. You know, that's simply not present. That was not a concern for the Buddha. Even for later Buddhist thinkers like Dharmakirti, you know, it's not that they want to reorganize society, that they want to reform society. No, you see, they are only concerned with who is entitled to achieving liberation. And any degenerative trend that tries to limit the spiritual search to upper class people, that he goes against. And in my opinion, rightly. But so the, you know, social concerns are not there. When I hear Hari Kiran, you mentioning about Black and Buddhist and woman and Buddhist and so on, well, again, you see that's hardly there. Of race, I do not know any concern in these texts. As for the status of women, there, of course, we can see again that the Buddha, as a child of his time, is absolutely sexist. He, like many sages in Hinduism, but also in Christianity and everywhere in the world, thinks of women as temptresses, as very dangerous, as absolutely to be avoided. It is only after great pressure from his own foster mother, when later in life she tries to become a member of the monastic order, that he allows for a nun's department, for letting women enter the Sangha, but only on condition that even the wisest, oldest, and so on woman is subordinate to the stupidest, youngest, and so on monk. So there's a very, very, very clear separation between women below and men above. And so it's not me saying that, it's the Buddha saying that, and very explicitly. So, you know, whatever they want to make of it now with their mindfulness and so on in the West, you know, maybe these things are good, but they're not Buddhism in the sense of the teaching of the Buddha. And you could say, of course, religions evolve over time, maybe so, but you can't instrumentalize the Buddha for that. You know, in that sense, you know, he was a very traditional person. Thank you.